For the past decade, I've been investigating the program.
How far back does this go?
It was the boys' side that planned the riot.
We were just talking about a riot, and it actually ended up happening.
Welcome down the rabbit hole, friends. The program, Cons, Cults, and Kidnapping, is a new Netflix documentary series which investigates the abuses that took place at a behavior modification program called the Academy at Ivy Ridge.
You're 13 years old and you're considered a troubled teenager. You go to sleep in the middle of the night, strangers take you out of your bed and drive you in a van to a boarding school to discipline you. They force you to disrobe, bend, and cough in front of an adult you don't know. You live here now, and you will continue to live here until your parents take you out. But you can't speak with them unless you're writing through a monitored letter, so you can't communicate what really happens in there. This is not jail. This is your new school.
It's a disturbing and emotional story, but it's also an important expose of a harmful industry that preys on vulnerable families and children.
What do you do if your child gets caught in a cycle of self-destructive or even dangerous behavior? Some desperate parents are turning to a drastic solution. They're having their children abducted, taken against their will to a behavior modification program.
Wait a minute. I should have known something like this would be right up my alley. Why? Because for the past 10 plus years, I've been working as a nurse in pediatric settings with children who require both psychiatric and behavioral intervention. All of my work has been done in public institutions, inpatient hospitals, and long-term incarceration facilities for children. During my work, there is no denying, I've always felt we needed more staff, better accommodations, more interventions, and yet nothing I ever experienced compares to the private behavior modification program detailed in this docuseries.
It sells tough love for troubled kids, but the reality is torture of children.
Catherine Daniel is the former Ivy Ridge student, director, producer, investigator, and pretty much the star of the entire series. Coming from a strict religious family with a stepmother she did not feel welcomed by, Catherine was abducted and arrived at Ivy Ridge one fateful day in 2004.
Considering how hard we tried to get out of the building while we were there, it's funny to think we'd be coming back.
Catherine's coming back to detail why the facility closed down and create a video diary of all of the abuses which were allegedly perpetrated at Ivy Ridge. Okay, it's here I want to mention something important to keep in mind when we're thinking about this program. Academy at Ivy Ridge was a privately owned and funded therapeutic boarding school. According to some reports, the cost of sending a child to the Academy at Ivy Ridge was around $4,000 per month, which would add up to a significant amount over the course of a year or more. Certainly, this high cost may have contributed to the sense of betrayal and frustration felt by the families who sent their children to this program, only to later discover it was abusive and harmful. So, while there's not a lot of information available about the specific demographics of students at the academy, it's likely that many of the families who sent their children there were going to be relatively well off, and we definitely see this in the case of Catherine Daniel. The high cost of tuition, combined with the school's marketing as a therapeutic boarding school, suggests that it may have attracted families who were looking for an exclusive, high-end program for their troubled teens.
What do you mean by rich kids are the kids that get into Ivy Mount? This is how much it costs to get kidnapped. This is how much punishment costs.
So, this is quite different from the public facilities I've worked with in the past. Suffice it to say, despite all the ways I found my previous employment environments to be lacking, the Academy at Ivy Ridge makes them look like a paradise, and I will be taking a closer look at many of the important differences and what they mean for the facility and population in question as we go through this docuseries. But for now, let's get back to Catherine and what brought her to the Ridge.
Catherine Daniel, real mom died of breast cancer. Yep, that's always my introduction to people. Before I was 2, had a lot of nannies. Dad remarried at age 7. I was really happy, then it started turning horrible.
Okay, the background Catherine gives us goes like this. Her bio mom died before she turned 2. She obviously comes from a wealthy family, with her father providing well for herself and her siblings. At one point, she says her father was the original documentarian and provided her with her first camera. As she got older, her father remarried a new wife, and Catherine never got along with her stepmother. She refers to her stepmom as a wicked stepparent and alleges a lot of yelling and emotional abuse. By the time Catherine was a teen, she started drinking, partying, and hanging out with guys. Her dad wasn't happy, and she begged him to send her out of the house because she hated living there with her stepmom. He agreed to send her to a super swanky Catholic school in New York, but Catherine got caught drinking there. And it's then that Ivy Ridge counselors arrived at her Catholic school and picked her up for her journey to the program.
I grew up in a conservative Christian family. I was heavily involved in my church youth group. I was on student council, a star soccer player.
Okay, major difference alert here. In order to attend a public placement like the many I've worked with over the course of my career, a child must present with the desire to harm themselves or others, or they must have committed and be found guilty of a crime. The real hospital and pediatric incarceration facilities that I've worked in are not going to house children just because they're not doing a good job of living up to their parents' expectations. Doctors and professionals would tell parents like Catherine's father, okay, let's get them into some counseling and set up better boundaries at home. Let's work with the family to ensure Catherine can stay safe and be a positive part of your family. But that takes a lot of work, especially on the part of the parents, and I'm starting to get the feeling Catherine's family didn't have the time or patience for all of that.
My parents had hired 2 strangers to forcibly escort me to Academy at Ivy Ridge in the small town of Ogdensburg in upstate New York.
How creepy, if I do say so myself. With a public placement, parents either escort their kids themselves or police will escort the child to the facility, but parents have to meet them there, and they are part of the check-in process. And part of that is for the child to feel comfortable and know that they're not completely abandoned by whatever family they knew before entering the facility.
Well, I just am gonna get the rest of my stuff from the car. They're like, no, you can't go outside anymore. We'll get it for you. This was like the first time I started realizing, like, this isn't a normal school. Like, what's going on?
Later, Catherine will tell us that Ivy Ridge is a lockdown facility. But I need to state that many environments I've worked in have been considered lockdown facilities as well. However, we still had large pieces of land outside that were fenced, and they were considered part of the lockdown. The children were allowed to be outside and have access to outside time and play throughout the day. I've even worked at facilities where they had horseback riding or other managed sports outside. Catherine claims that they were not allowed to go outside at all during her time at Ivy Ridge.
And jump up and down and cough. Strip searched. So then they had me sleep in the hallway.
Catherine's first day at the Ridge included a strip search, and this is very common in facilities I've worked in. Although, we've always done our best to explain to the child why we have to do this and make it as comfortable as possible for them. Now, sleeping on a mattress in the hallway, this can be implemented when a child has a special safety concern, such as they have a recent history of harming others and they are threatening to do so again. However, this would only be in like a really extreme situation, and we would be more likely to give that child a one-on-one staff member who would sit directly outside the room of the child whenever they were asleep or alone. Some children, especially some of our younger kids who have nightmares, would at times ask to sleep in the hallway next to a nurse's station so that they could be out in a public area where they feel most safe. And this would be implemented on a case-by-case basis.
In addition to academic curriculum, students are also taught values, integrity, honor, accountability,
and respect for authority.
Ivy Ridge advertised themselves as not only creating behavioral changes in your child, but also supplying them with a top-notch education. I mean, I would hope so for $4,000 a month, right? But that was not the case. It turns out Ivy Ridge wasn't even accredited, and Catherine claims the kids just sat at computers all day long trying to complete a computerized homeschool program.
When you first arrive, you're put on run watch, where they take your shoelaces and make you sleep in the hallway. Kids who were placed on suicide watch had to sleep with their arms outstretched, so staff could monitor that they weren't trying to hurt themselves.
Some of the consequences that Catherine describes in the docuseries seem way too much like physical torture. Facilities I've worked in follow legal guidelines of what is allowed and not allowed to take place under medical care. We would never be allowed to ask patients to stand or lay in positions of stress. There are times when violent patients are placed in quote-unquote holds, but these are videotaped and carried out after extensive training with staff who are certified. Every piece of the situation is overly documented. Parents and doctors are informed and consulted. A patient's rights must be upheld at all times, or a facility will be in danger of losing its license. I guess that's part of the problem here at Ivy Ridge. It doesn't seem like they have a license to uphold.
Other students. You can't touch anyone. You have to pivot around every corner and maintain a strict military-like structure. You have to wear your hair in a braid. No makeup. No shaving.
The rules at Ivy Ridge, they really blow my mind. Certainly, removing a patient's individuality would not be allowed in a medical behavioral setting, and the rules doled out at Ivy Ridge come across like something you would expect at a very strict Catholic or even military school. So, many of us may be questioning, how much of Catherine's telling of this story can we really believe? Well, shockingly, it turns out when Catherine and her crew broke into the now abandoned Ivy Ridge School, they discovered thousands of discarded notes and videos, all cataloging much of what Catherine alleges happened at Ivy Ridge, including an infamous riot Catherine and her friends were all part of. Please join me tomorrow as we take a look and dissect what happened with the Ivy Ridge riot and how the school still remains open. We will also hear from former staff and delve deeper into Catherine's story. I hope to see you all again here with me tomorrow, friends.